For the past 2 weeks, update news has been slow to come by, so actually, there's going to be a review of like the past week or so in update news on Tower Defense Simulator. Firstly, we start with balancing feedback, which, again, to remind everyone, not everything here is subject, not obligated to make it into the main game. Just because an idea is popular does not mean it'll make it into the final game as a product. But it does look like the Swarmer was polled, and the majority of people said that the Swarmer is balanced. This was after the fact that the Swarmer was kind of changed around a bit. This was because the balancing for the Swarmer was kind of rushed because of the fact that it was still buggy during testing until the last couple of days before the Swarmer was released as a tower. Hence why when it was released, it was kind of OP, could stack up to 5,000 bees and had a stack per tower of like 200 or something. Now that the Swarmer has been balanced, kinda-ish, people have now recognised the fact that the Swarmer is balanced and not, I mean, it is still an OP, it's not an OP tower. I think it's more of a balanced tower that has good use during the endgame especially, but compared to what it was before, yes, it's significantly worse. But most people have said that it is balanced, and 28% of people have said that it sucks, and 12% of people said it's still overpowered. Most people say it's balanced, 60%. Which means hopefully the Swarmer isn't going to get any more tinkering with its statistics. I mean, unless there's like another power creep of towers in the near future, I think the Swarmer is fine as it is. So hopefully that gives some people the reassurance that if they spend 800 Robux for the Swarmer Game Pass, which is still on sale surprisingly, it's not going to get changed too much. So that's good. And again, apparently, some people are still attacking the testers for making an OP tower that you can even buy with Robux. Again, it's not really the testers' fault. They did have a limited time to test this out, and there was like a major bug with stacking that wasn't fixed until the Swarmer was meant to be released into the main game. So, to be fair, having like a matter of only 4 months, no, not 4 months, 4 weeks, or even less than that, probably 3 weeks, to balance the Swarmer and it coming out like this, I think is very good. Next, I talked about the Grim skin issue potentially being fixed, where some people, they couldn't actually claim the Grim skin. So I know for one of the testers in the game, or one of the moderators in the game, because they have a war machine here, that they couldn't actually claim the Grim skin as seen here. They don't own the Grim skin. It looks like they do, but they don't. So while it seems to be fixed on my alt, or my alt never experienced the issue, it seems as if some people still do have this issue where they can't even buy it with the Game Pass, nor can they earn it. It seems really weird. I'm not entirely sure what the developers can do to fix it, given the fact that I do believe that the event is ending this Wednesday. In other news, the testers of the game are actually discussing a Gatling gun buff. Because right now, the Gatling gun is seen as a little underwhelming. In fact, most people see it as very underwhelming. I've not actually seen the Gatling gun being used that often anymore, especially when you compare it to, say, other high DPS towers, such as the Ranger, the Pursuit, in fact not even as much as like the Minigunner, for example, the Golden Minigunner. So the poll here is the Gatling gun buff should be Pierce orientated, so less max DPS, because the fun fact about the Gatling gun is that it has a Pierce of 3 but only in FPS mode. It being able to deal more damage to more enemies means that overall its DPS, its max DPS has to be lower, which means that it won't be such a good boss killer, but it'll be a very good horde dealer. Then the other option is high DPS with low pierce, so kind of what it is right now, except maybe 2 max hits instead of 3, but with the higher than, I think it's about 700 DPS that it has right now at max level. Or a hybrid, which is the current version, which is 3 max hits and about 700-ish DPS, but slightly higher for a rework. And the majority of people want high DPS with low pierce, so maybe like 2 max hits. What I see for the Gatling gun is basically what the Gatling gun was previously, which was about 925 DPS. However, the max hits for the Gatling gun being reduced. So instead of having 3 max hits, maybe just 1 or 2. What I never understood was why did the Gatling gun even have max hits in the first place when other towers of a similar caliber, say the Minigunner or the Pursuit, other than its missiles, it didn't hit more than 1 enemy. I actually totally agree with the fact that the Gatling gun should probably be buffed up to about 925 DPS, but it shouldn't have a max hits of more than 2, if even necessary. It shouldn't have a max hits, in my opinion, at all in FPS mode. Because the fact that you can control the tower is an advantage in of itself, because you can avoid, say, the aggro of certain enemies, and you can just target the boss enemies at all times. Plus, it'll actually add a weakness to the Gatling gun, which is hordes. Or multiple bosses, say, I don't know, in Badlands 2, for example, when there are multiple bosses that spawn in previous to the Gunslinger. In fact, in maps such as Badlands 2, when there are multiple paths that are separated with high DPS Gatling gun with no pierce, that's where the Gatling gun would struggle. But I think many people would be willing to trade that in for a Gatling gun which has nearly 1000 DPS. And why not? The Gatling gun never really mentions max hits as part of FPS mode, so changing it over into a single target tower that doesn't hit multiple enemies, I think could probably actually do good on paper and allow some diversity when it comes to towers. I mean, yeah, people are probably going to use like the mortar, for example, just to counter the Gatling gun's weakness. But hey, better than just a single tower dominating the entire game, you know? And given the fact that the max hits isn't actually perceived as part of statistics when it comes to DPS, I don't think many people would interpret it as a nerf, even if on paper the maximum amount of damage or the maximum amount of DPS that the Gatling gun can deal hypothetically is lowered because of the max hit being lowered. Oh, and there's a secret fourth option, which is nerf the Gatling gun again, which, you know, that is my favourite opinion. Just nerf the Gatling gun to like 400 DPS at max level. And just to clarify, before the votes on this go too crazy, I'd like to clarify that option 3 will never have 1000 DPS because 1k DPS with 2.5 pierce is absolutely insane. 2.5 pierce, that's a max hit of 3, and a hybrid having a decent amount of max hits, I can understand as not having 1000 DPS, but 1000 DPS with high DPS with low pierce, I kind of agree with. So option A would have around 5 pierce for 400 DPS, okay. Option B, 1050 DPS for 1.5 pierce. Again, I don't really understand why the decimal pierce. Does it mean like half the time it only can hit one enemy and the other time it can hit 2 enemies? And option C would be a minor buff to the current version of the Gatling gun, and these numbers are arbitrary. Okay, so 1.5 pierce. So I assume it means that the developers are debating whether it has 1 pierce, so either it can hit 2 enemies or it can hit 1 enemy, which, to be fair, if this was to be implemented, would be the first time that a tower would have a random amount of pierce. Overall though, no other news about the other high DPS towers or late game DPS towers that are in the game. So another example of a tower that probably should get changed is the accelerator, and many people have said that it should get changed. 71% of people said the accelerator should change compared to the Pursuit, Ranger, Engineer and Turret. Genuinely, other than the Engineer perhaps changing slightly, like taking a longer while to ramp up but having more DPS, the other towers are kind of balanced. The Turret, I'm not so sure. It does have a max tower limit of 3, I think. Maybe you could increase that to 4 or 5. But other than that, I think high DPS towers are fine now that it is, apart from the aforementioned Accelerator, Engineer and Gatling gun. But it's not like these towers are absolutely useless anyways. We're not talking about the paintballer here. Then we have the news that Below Natural is going to be at RDC 25, Roblox Developer Conference 25, which is going to be hosted at San Jose on the September 5th to September 6th. This is kind of important given the fact that the RDC conference is being held Friday to basically Sunday-ish, and all developers are meant to be there about the 4th. So I expect there to be a minor or major update on the 3rd, but then no update on the 10th, which, I mean, if we were still hosting bi-weekly updates, I still think that's going to happen. Except that if there was to be an update the week previously, it'll probably be made on the 3rd, a minor update on the 3rd, and then no update on the 10th. Also, this would be the time when a Halloween update probably would be planned, so, again, not entirely sure of any major updates in September. Barely any updates in September have been major throughout the entire history of Tower Defense Simulator, purely because most efforts are concentrated on October/Halloween updates. But am I going to RDC? That's the question. And interestingly, I'm majorly considering going to America for the first time in my life. We'll have to see if I end up at RDC 25, but Below Natural, if you are watching this, or any of the developers watching this, because I know you do watch, I have a Commander hoodie in my closet right now. Perhaps I could get that signed that could entice me to go to RDC. We'll have to see. And by the way, Outer Bears does confirm that there's going to be an update this Wednesday, saying that is a fun update too, suggesting that it's going to be a major-ish update that adds new content to the game, because previously, while the last update did add some content to the game, that being Lighthouse and Retro Zone rework, they weren't what you consider fun updates. It's just a new map. And like, while I do like new maps, most people would like to say have a new tower or a new system entirely in the game. But guess what? We've actually seen a new tower leak, including the promise of the 48 Hidden Wave winners, which is actually 50, getting a special skin soon, so could be in the next update. Furthermore, the long-awaited skills update, that could also come, and maybe even perhaps PvP mode or PvP testing being added. for another weekend or 2 weeks of testing. Now, I don't expect like a whole new load of things that haven't been leaked to be added. Like, for example, I don't expect the mecha base all of a sudden to be released, or the war machine to be all of a sudden released, or evolved towers to somehow come out of nowhere and actually say, actually, we're replacing golden skins in this update. Nor do I think code for merchandise skins will actually be added, because that's based on Roblox and it's not actually based on the developer's wishes. But yes, there should be an update in a couple of days, and it should be a major update. We'll have to see on that.